A foreign cargo ship apparently sank after being shelled near the southern Ukrainian port of Odessa. The Held, owned by an Estonian company and sailing under the Panamanian flag, was hit below the waterline and then disappeared from the radar, the Ukrainian port authorities said on Thursday. A spokesman for the Estonian Foreign Ministry said the 6 crew members had been rescued and were safe. There were no Estonian citizens among them. Accordingly, the incident occurred around 20 nautical miles, that's 37 kilometers, off the Ukrainian coast in the Black Sea. The exact circumstances are still unclear. The Ukrainian authorities also gave no information on who fired at the ship. The French head of state Emmanuel Macron has officially entered the race for the next presidency. The centre politician announced his candidacy for the April elections on Thursday evening. The newspaper Libération put a letter from Macron to the population online, which will also be published in the country's printed newspapers, or they were printed on Friday. The 44-year-old is applying for a second term in the Élysée Palace, which he has headed since 2017. In polls, Macron has been in first place for months with around 25% approval, ahead of right-wing Marine Le Pen, conservative Valérie Pécresse, and right-wing extremist Éric Zemmour. In the last 5 years, we have survived a multitude of trials together. Terrorism, pandemics, the return of violence, war in Europe. France has seldom faced such an accumulation of crises, wrote Macron, who responded to the announcement of his candidacy in a speech because of the Ukrainian war. We haven't achieved everything. With today's experience, he would make some decisions differently. But the changes introduced during his tenure would have given many French people a better life and France more independence. The crises of the past 2 years have shown that his path must be continued. I therefore ask for your trust for another term as President of the Republic. I am a candidate to find, together with you, a unique French and European response to the challenges of the century, wrote the President. Macron started his tenure as a young political star and promised a fresh political start. With numerous reforms, he wanted to redesign the allocation of study places and the labor market and create a fairer pension system. In terms of foreign policy too, he advocated a renewal of the European Union. Again and again, there were mass demonstrations against Macron's reform plans. More than ever, opponents saw him as the embodiment of a political elite that lives detached from the concerns and problems of ordinary people. The protests by the so-called Yellow Vests in particular put the president under pressure for weeks. The LREM, La République En Marche, that's the party founded by Macron, and they performed poorly in the 2020 local elections and the 2021 regional elections. Macron got off to a flying start in the 2017 presidential election. As an outsider outside the classic party spectrum, he benefited from the divided left and the affair of the conservative candidate François Fillon about an alleged bogus job by his wife. In the runoff, the pro-European ultimately prevailed against Le Pen. Sentiment among companies in the Eurozone improved again in February. The Purchasing Managers Index of the research company IHS Markit rose by 3.2 points compared to January, as Markit announced on Thursday in London after a second estimate. An initial estimate has been revised slightly downwards. After the slowdown in January, the economy has regained momentum, commented Markit. The mood among service providers improved significantly, but in industry it clouded over, according to figures from Tuesday. The indicators in the service sectors of Italy and Spain rose particularly significantly. However, the development was accompanied by persistently significant price increases, according to Markit. Chief economist Chris Williamson referred to the easing of the burden of the corona pandemic on the one hand and the risks to growth and inflation due to the Ukraine conflict on the other. The survey results pointed to an economy that was growing robustly, at least before Russia invaded Ukraine. The protective measures against the pandemic were significantly relaxed in February, which improved the situation. However, companies continue to face bottlenecks in supply chains and labor shortages. Williamson sees risks in further rising energy and commodity prices as a result of the Ukraine conflict. The growth prospects are also likely to be dampened by the crisis. Georgia intends to apply for EU membership as early as this week's Thursday, so 2 days ago. We call on the EU bodies to subject our application to emergency review and to grant Georgia the status of an EU candidate country, said the head of the ruling Georgian Dream Party, Irakli Kobakhidze, according to the online portal civil.ge. This is a political decision by the party taking into account the general political context and the new reality. The application was supposed to be submitted on behalf of the government in Brussels. With that, Kobakhidze is making a U-turn. On Tuesday, he insisted that Georgia would not submit such an application until 2024 because a hasty initiative could be counterproductive. In the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, Kobakhidze had also assured the government in Kiev of Georgia's support. However, the ex-Soviet Republic does not want to participate in the sanctions imposed by the EU, the USA and many other countries. The relationship between Tiflis and Moscow has been strained since the 2008 war in the Caucasus at the latest. Accession to the Union of currently 27 countries is usually enormously complicated and lengthy. In principle, according to Article 49 of the EU Treaty, any European state can apply for admission, provided that it respects basic EU values such as democracy and the rule of law. In practice, however, EU law must first be transposed into national law. Strict requirements even apply to the start of accession negotiations. There are currently 5 candidates: Serbia, Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia and Turkey. Turkey's accession negotiations have been going nowhere for more than 20 years. The distribution of the Russian state media RT and Sputnik in the EU is now banned. The measure came into force on Wednesday with a publication in the official journal of the European Union. It must be implemented in each individual EU country. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures, said EU Commission Vice President Vera Jourova on Tuesday evening after a meeting with representatives of the Group of European Regulators for Audiovisual Media Services, or ERGA. We all stand for freedom of speech, but it must not be misused to spread war propaganda. The Kremlin has weaponized information, she said. EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said on Wednesday that words are crucial in times of war. We are witnessing massive propaganda and disinformation about this egregious attack on a free and independent country. However, they will not allow those loyal to the Kremlin to spread their poisonous lies to justify Putin's war or sow the seeds of division in our union. The current sanction affects all distribution channels of RT and Sputnik in the EU, such as cable, satellite or internet. RT offshoots in German or French, for example, are also effective. RT editor-in-chief Margita Simonian has been subject to EU sanctions since last week. These concern an entry ban, and possible assets in the EU have also been frozen. The RT and Sputnik journalists themselves should not be prevented from doing their jobs, EU officials stressed. The sanctions were drawn up very carefully, it said, also in view of concerns about possible cuts in freedom of the press. The sanctions against RT and Sputnik should be temporary and only last until the aggression against Ukraine has ended and the Russian Federation and its media have stopped their propaganda actions against the Union and its member states, said an EU official. The EU media regulators, who are represented in ERGA, emphasized on Wednesday that they stand united and are committed to contributing to the rapid implementation of the measures by all those involved. Facebook group Meta and video app TikTok have already restricted access to RT and Sputnik content in the EU. Independent of the EU decision, German media regulators have threatened a fine of 25,000 euros against RT's German language live program, as the Berlin-Brandenburg Media Authority announced on Tuesday to the German press agency. The regulators want to ensure that RTDE Productions, based in Berlin, discontinues the live TV program of RTDE. The reason is that the media authorities had issued a broadcasting ban at the beginning of February because there was no broadcasting license for the program in Germany. A license is basically a prerequisite for offering a radio program or a TV program in this country. The German language live program RTDE has been broadcast since December. The EU has put into effect its sanctions banning 7 Russian financial institutions from the SWIFT banking communications network. A traditional period of 10 days applies. Among other things, the second largest bank in Russia, VTB, is affected, according to the EU official journal published on Wednesday. The SWIFT ban is one of the harshest punitive measures taken by the European Union since the start of the Russian war against Ukraine. The fundamental decision on this was made on Sunday night, together with allies such as the USA, Canada, Italy, and Great Britain. According to the German federal government, the financial institutions are to be cut off from international financial flows, which will massively restrict their global activities. EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said at the weekend that in view of the Russian attack on Ukraine, they were more determined than ever to impose a high price on Russia for this aggression and to further isolate the country from the international financial system and economically. In addition to VTB Bank, 6 other institutes are to be excluded from SWIFT. These are Bank Odessa, Novicom Bank, State Bank Promsyav Bank, Bank Rossiya, Sovcom Bank, and State Bank VEB. The largest Russian banks Sberbank and Gazprom Bank are not affected. A high-ranking EU official justified this on Wednesday with the fact that some EU countries are particularly dependent on energy supplies from Russia, including Germany. Sberbank and Gazprom Bank are the main banks for payment of energy supplies. It's not possible to exempt certain transactions from a SWIFT exclusion. According to the official, the 10-day period should make the transition easier for domestic banks. He also stressed that the EU has already imposed other sanctions on Sberbank and Gazprom Bank. According to him, more than 80% of Russian banks are now affected by EU sanctions. In addition to the SWIFT ban, the new sanctions package also includes a ban on investors in the EU from participating in projects of the Russian Direct Investment Fund. It also includes a ban on the delivery of euro banknotes to Russia. The background is that some banks have at least considered the possibility of physically transporting banknotes, it's said. SWIFT provides the infrastructure that allows financial institutions to securely communicate with each other when transferring funds across national borders. Exclusion means that those affected are effectively cut off from the global financial system. According to SWIFT, more than 11,000 participants in more than 200 countries use the service, mainly banks, but also investment firms and large corporations. The USA and the EU have already enacted sanctions against the Russian central bank, among other things. Transactions with the central bank have been banned since Monday night, and all of the central bank's assets in the EU have been frozen. According to German Finance Minister Christian Lindner, the measure is already having an effect. The ruble is in free fall. Vladimir Putin's war chest has been hit hard, said the liberal politician on Tuesday. This measure has less impact on us, but maximum impact on Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has confirmed his terms for ending what he calls military operation and I call war in Ukraine, according to the Kremlin. The government in Kiev must recognize the so-called People's Republics of Luhansk and Donetsk and Russia's sovereignty over the Black Sea Peninsula of Crimea, the Kremlin announced on Tuesday evening in Moscow. In addition, Ukraine must be demilitarized and given a neutral status, according to a statement on a phone call between Putin and Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro. It was the first statement of this kind after representatives of Ukraine and Russia in Belarus on Monday negotiated an end to the war. Results were not there on Monday on the first meeting. According to the Kremlin, Ukraine must also undertake to continue to do without nuclear weapons in the future. Putin had previously demanded that Ukraine should not become a member of NATO. He recognized the eastern Ukrainian regions of Luhansk and Donetsk as independent states. Putin launched what he called special military operation last Thursday, officially with the aim of protecting the Russian-speaking population in eastern Ukraine from attacks by Ukrainian nationalists. Russian troops then invaded Ukraine. The European Union is open to the accession of Ukraine, which has been attacked by Russia. But this will be a long way, said EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen on Tuesday in the European Parliament. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was live in front of the MEPs, urgently asking for his country's admission to the EU, initially received above all expressions of solidarity and additional financial commitments. According to von der Leyen, the EU wants to provide 500 million euros for humanitarian aid and the care of refugees, in addition to the already known military aid of the same amount. A resolution passed by the Parliament condemns the Russian attacks on Ukraine and supports EU sanctions against Russia. However, the wording on Ukraine's EU membership is cautious. The EU institutions should work towards the country being granted the status of an EU accession candidate. Against the background of the heavy fighting with Russia, Zelensky had submitted an application to the EU on Monday for immediate admission of Ukraine according to a new special procedure. And almost all speakers in the special session of the EU Parliament on Tuesday showed sympathy for it. They expressed their horror at the Russian attack and admiration for the resistance of the Ukrainians. They made it clear that Ukraine belongs to Europe and they don't want to be left hanging. But joining the club of currently 27 states is usually infinitely complicated and lengthy. This was also indicated by EU Council President Charles Michel. The issue of accession is difficult and there are different views among member states, Michel said in Parliament. But the Council will not be able to evade its responsibility. At least a serious examination of Zelensky's request, Michel agreed. One will work towards the goal, formulated Parliament President Roberta Metsola. The first question is whether Ukraine can officially become a candidate for accession. In the case of Ukraine, which has had an association agreement with the EU since 2017, corruption is considered a high hurdle. The EU Court of Auditors found in 2021 that oligarchs and interest groups continue to undermine the rule of law in Ukraine. The auditors described corruption in Ukraine as a major problem, despite EU support for judicial reforms, for example. According to the logic of the EU, it is hardly conceivable that all of this will be ignored and that Ukraine will whiz past the other candidate countries. German Federal Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock made this clear. Everyone is aware that joining the EU is not something that you can do in a few months. She said that on Monday. At the same time, Baerbock emphasized Ukraine is part of the House of Europe. The statements by von der Leyen and Michel also moved in this field of tension, signaling a close bond but without any overly concrete commitments. The German Commission President said, "Today the EU and Ukraine are more closely linked than ever, but there is still a long way to go. One must first put an end to the war and talk about the next steps. But I'm sure that nobody in this plenary hall can doubt that the people who stand up so courageously for our European values belongs to our European family. After all, the European Union is more united internally than it has been for a long time, condemning the Russian attack, supporting the sanctions imposed on Moscow, taking in refugees, financially and morally supporting Ukraine. All of these are issues that are discussed in the EU and could be argued for a long time and in small parts, and where now almost all political party families are at least converging. Most people in Brussels are also aware of the dramatic break, or in von der Leyen's words, this is the moment of truth for Europe. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.